Buckle up, folks, because today we're diving headfirst into one of the biggest financial wipeouts in history, Black Thursday and the 1929 stock market crash.
Ooh, yeah, this is a big one.
It is a big one. We've got some really fascinating excerpts about this era that paint a vivid picture, and we're not just going to list off some dates and facts.
Right.
We're going to really try to dissect the forces at play.
Yeah.
And see if we can pull out some lessons learned.
What makes this one so interesting to me is just how much it still resonates today, whether you're into finance or history or just trying to figure out, how the world works.
Right.
The lessons from this crash are, I think, still incredibly relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kick things off, let's set the stage a little bit. Our sources describe the Roaring '20s, right? Jazz Flapper addresses this feeling that the good times would never end.
Yeah.
Was this optimism justified, or was there something a little more complex going on?
Well, I mean, the economic boom of the 1920s was very real. Like, it wasn't just an illusion. New technologies like automobiles and radios were genuinely transforming society.
Right.
But this boom, this incredible economic expansion, was also fueled by a lot of, let's just say, risky behavior in the stock market.
Risky how?
People were so eager to, cash in on the good times that they started borrowing heavily to buy stocks.
Right, and that's what they call buying on margin, right?
Exactly.
And that's something that our sources really highlight as a major factor in the crash.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, why was buying on margin so dangerous? If everyone's making money, what's the big deal?
Well, think of it like this. Buying on margin basically amplified both your gains and your losses. So imagine you can control a large amount of stock, but you've only put down a small down payment.
Okay.
If prices go up, you make a killing.
Right.
But if they go down, well, you could lose more money than you initially invested. It's all about leverage.
Yeah, it was a high-risk, high-reward situation.
Exactly. And it depended entirely on this idea that the market would just keep going up and up.
Forever.
Yeah, forever. Which, as we know, is not how things work.
Right. So were people just completely ignoring the risks involved, or were there other factors at play that made them so susceptible to this speculative frenzy?
It was definitely a time of this incredible social and technological change, you know. The world was modernizing, people were eager to be a part of it, and the stock market became this symbol of this new prosperity. It was a way for ordinary people to feel like they were participating in the booming economy.
Okay, so this optimism, maybe it blinded some people to the potential downsides.
It's possible, but our sources also mention some warning signs that were kind of brushed aside at the time.
Like what kind of warning signs?
Well, there was, declining industrial production, rising unemployment, and the agricultural sector was really struggling with low prices.
So it wasn't all sunshine and roses?
Not exactly. These warning signs were kind of cracks in the foundation.
Gotcha. So while some industries were booming, others were having a harder time adapting to these changing times.
Yeah. And, the agricultural sector, for example, was facing this problem of overproduction and falling prices.
So it sounds like the roaring economy had a bit of a shaky foundation.
You could say that.
Were there any attempts made to, rein in this risky behavior, or was it just sort of like a free-for-all?
At the time, the financial system was largely unregulated.
Really?
There were very few safeguards in place to prevent this kind of excessive speculation or to protect investors from risky practices like buying on margin.
So it was basically a system ripe for disaster.
It was a bubble waiting to burst.
And then Black Thursday hit October 24, 1929.
Yeah, and our sources describe these scenes of just absolute panic on the trading floor.
Oh, I bet.
You have investors finally realizing that, this can't go on forever. They rush to sell their stocks.
Right.
And the sheer volume of trading, over 12.9 million shares traded in a single day, just completely overwhelms the system. It was unprecedented.
Wow. I mean, I can only imagine just chaos everywhere. People frantically trying to sell, prices plummeting, this feeling of dread setting in as fortunes just evaporate.
It must have felt like the end of the world.
Yeah. But didn't a group of banks try to step in and do something?
I did. In a desperate attempt to stabilize the market, some major banks pooled their resources and they started buying stocks.
Okay.
And this did provide a brief respite, but it was very short-lived.
Because this was just the first tremor, right?
Exactly. Black Thursday was just the beginning.
Because just a few days later, the market continued to decline, and then we had Black Tuesday. And that's where things really took a turn for the worse.
Yeah, that's where the real devastation hit.
It's like the music stopped,
Yeah.
the party's over, everyone's going home, and the handover is setting in.
Yeah.
Black Tuesday wiped out, what, $14 billion?
It's a staggering number.
It's hard to even fathom that much money.
Yeah.
What really struck me in our sources, though, was reading the human stories from this time.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the numbers.
Yeah? Right.
But behind every stock ticker, there were real people whose lives were about to be turned upside down.
Absolutely. I mean, our sources describe these scenes of utter despair.
Yeah.
People losing their life savings, their homes.
Their dreams, their futures.
Everything.
Everything.
It's a stark reminder that these kinds of financial crises,
Yeah.
they have a very real human cost.
They do.
You know, it's not just about abstract numbers on a screen.
Right.
It's about people's lives being completely shattered.
And it's important, I think, to remember that it's these individual stories that help us connect with the human dimension of history. And there's this one story about a prominent financier, a guy who seemingly, navigated the boom years with incredible success.
Okay, so this guy, he was like at the top of his game.
Yeah, he was admired, envied for his financial acumen. He seemed to have it all figured out.
So what happened to him when the crash hit?
His empire crumbled. The crash exposed that a lot of his success was built on leverage and speculation. Oh. He lost everything. His fortune, his reputation, and ultimately his life.
He took his own life.
He did. Just weeks after the crash, unable to cope with the magnitude of his losses.
That's a tragic story.
It is.
It's a reminder that even those who seem invincible can be brought down by these events. But I guess not everyone lost everything, right? The sources mentioned, I think, a shoe shiner named Joe Kennedy.
Joe Kennedy?
Yeah, who actually managed to escape the crash relatively unscathed.
Joe Kennedy's story is fascinating. It's an example of how a little skepticism and a lot of common sense can be more valuable than so-called expert advice.
So I vaguely remember this story. Didn't he overhear some stockbrokers bragging about their profits or something?
Yeah, he was shining shoes outside a brokerage firm, and he overheard these traders, boasting about their gains.
Okay.
They were incredibly bullish on the market, completely caught up in that speculative frenzy.
And that's when his alarm bells started to go off.
Exactly. He realized that if even the shoe shiner was privy to stock tips, the market was probably overheated. So he sold all his stock holdings, a decision that ultimately saved him from financial ruin.
So it's a good reminder that we should be careful about blindly following the crowd.
Yes, especially when it comes to our finances.
Yeah. Sometimes it pays to be a contrarian, to question conventional wisdom, and to really trust your gut.
I think so.
But I want to shift gears for a second here. How did this crash reshape American society beyond just the financial realm?
Well, the Great Depression, which followed the crash, had a profound impact on American culture and society. The carefree extravagance of the Roaring '20s gave way to an era of thrift and frugality.
It's like the whole country went on a forced financial diet.
It was a time of immense hardship and uncertainty. Millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, their sense of security. Breadlines became a common sight in cities across America, and, stories of families struggling to survive became all too common.
It sounds just devastating. And our sources talk about this sense of disillusionment, this anger towards the government. Did the government do anything to try to address the crisis?
Well, this widespread discontent led to a demand for change, and it ultimately paved the way for Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal program.
Right, the New Deal. This series of programs and reforms aimed at providing relief, recovery, and reform.
Exactly.
Were these programs effective in actually tackling the crisis, though?
The New Deal was a very sweeping and ambitious undertaking. It encompassed a wide range of initiatives.
Okay.
It provided direct relief to the unemployed. It invested in public works projects to create jobs, and it reformed the banking system to restore confidence in the financial sector.
So it was a multi-pronged approach to kind of tackle the crisis from all angles.
Precisely. And while the overall effectiveness is still debated among historians, there's no doubt that it had a profound impact on American society. It helped alleviate some of the immediate suffering caused by the Depression, and it laid the foundation for a stronger social safety net.
And it also kind of marked this significant shift in the role of government in the economy, right?
Absolutely. The New Deal ushered in an era of greater government intervention in the economy. The government took on a much more active role in regulating markets, providing social welfare programs, and promoting economic growth.
So the crash and the subsequent depression really reshaped the social, political, and economic landscape of the United States.
You did.
And those effects are still being felt today.
I think so. And it's fascinating to see how the echoes of this event can still be heard in contemporary debates about things like government regulation, social safety nets, and the role of finance in society.
It's like the 1929 crash. It wasn't just a singular event.
Right.
It was this turning point, this moment that forced a reevaluation of our relationship with the economy, with the government, and with our own financial well-being.
It really gets to the heart of why it's so crucial to understand history.
Right.
It's not just about looking back, it's about applying the lessons of the past to the present.
So the big question is, are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of 1929?
That's the question, isn't it?
Are there parallels between that era and the world we live in today?
That's a question worth exploring. And that's exactly what we'll do in the final part of our deep dive into Black Thursday and the 1929 stock market crash.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Black Thursday and the 1929 stock market crash. We've covered a lot of ground so far, the euphoria, the roaring 20s,
Yeah.
the panic of the crash itself, and the devastating consequences that followed.
And we've also uncovered some pretty incredible human stories.
Yeah, we have stories of both tremendous loss, but also remarkable resilience. So now let's turn our attention to the future. What are the key takeaways from this historical event?
Right.
What wisdom can we glean from this cautionary tale, especially in today's world?
Well, the parallels between 1929 and today are certainly thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And one of the most significant lessons, in my view, is the danger of unchecked speculation, whether it's stocks or real estate or even, tulips. Like in 17th century Holland, history has shown us time and time again that these speculative bubbles fueled by exuberance and easy credit, they inevitably burst.
Right. It's like that saying, what goes up must come down.
Exactly.
But how do we recognize those moments when things are getting a little too frothy?
Right.
When prices are rising, not because of real value, but because of hype and this herd mentality.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's where I think critical thinking comes in.
Yeah.
We need to be able to resist the allure of these get-rich-quick schemes and ask ourselves some tough questions.
Okay, like what?
Like, is this investment truly valuable, or am I just buying into the hype?
Right.
Remember Joe Kennedy,
The shoe shiner?
the shoe shiner, who sold his stocks because everyone around him, even he was getting stock tips?
Right, he decided to go against the grain.
Yeah, he trusted his gut and went against the grain. And it saved him.
It did. And it's a good reminder that we shouldn't let fear or greed cloud our judgment, especially when it comes to, big financial decisions.
Absolutely. And while personal responsibility is absolutely crucial, the 1929 crash also highlighted the importance of sound financial regulation.
Right, because without that oversight, things can get out of control pretty quickly.
Exactly. Without proper oversight, risky practices can run rampant, and that leads to instability and ultimately systemic crises.
Our sources definitely highlighted the lack of regulation back then.
Yeah.
It's like driving a car at high speed with no brakes.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
You might enjoy the thrill for a while, but eventually you're headed for a crash.
You are institutions like the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which was created in response to the 1929 crash. They play a crucial role in safeguarding the financial system.
Okay, so they're like the brakes.
Exactly. They're
Yeah.
the brakes. They ensure transparency, they help prevent fraud, and they protect investors from undue risk.
But regulation sometimes gets a bad rap, right?
It does.
People say that it stifles innovation. So how do we strike that balance?
Right.
How do we foster a dynamic market, but also prevent the kind of reckless behavior that led to the crash?
That's the million-dollar question. It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
It is.
But history shows us that a certain degree of regulation is essential for a stable and healthy financial system.
Okay.
We need regulations that are robust enough to prevent excessive risk-taking,
Right.
but also flexible enough to allow for, innovation and growth.
So it's about finding that sweet spot.
It is. Finding that sweet spot where regulations protect us from the worst excesses, but don't stifle the dynamism of the market.
So what else can we learn from 1929, especially as we think about today's interconnected world?
Well, the 1929 crash, while it originated in the United States, it had a ripple effect across the globe.
Right.
It demonstrated quite painfully, I think, that the global economy is deeply interconnected.
And that interconnectedness is even more pronounced today.
So, absolutely.
What with globalization and the free flow of capital across borders.
Yeah, so what happens in one corner of the world can very quickly impact everyone else. We're all in the same boat, so to speak.
We are. So what does that mean for us? How do we navigate this reality?
Well, it highlights the need for international cooperation in addressing these economic challenges.
Right.
We need coordinated efforts to ensure financial stability, to regulate these global markets, and to try to prevent future crises.
So cooperation, not isolation.
Exactly. No country's an island, especially in today's world.
Looking back at this deep dive,
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that history matters.
It does.
It's not just about dusty textbooks and dates.
Right.
It's about understanding The forces that shape our world, the patterns that repeat themselves, and the lessons that we can learn from the past.
I love that history is a conversation we have with ourselves about who we are, where we've been, and where we're going. And the more we understand the past, the better equipped we are to navigate the present and to shape the future.
So as we wrap up our exploration of Black Thursday and the 1929 stock market crash,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with this question. What lessons have you gleaned from this deep dive? How can you apply these insights to your own financial decisions, your understanding of the economy, and even your perspective on the world around you?
Remember, the echoes of 1929 can still be felt today. It's up to each of us to learn from the mistakes of the past and to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself.
That's right. Until next time, fellow deep divers, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning from the past.